This is episode 6, entitled Work, a Human Resource Manager in a Large Multinational. I grew. I found myself during that time. Hello world, welcome to the show. We work, rest and play. This is where we dissect, decipher and demystify people's work and their lives outside of work. I'm Dan, your host, and welcome to episode 6. In this episode, we are talking work, where we go deep and get real about what it's like to work as a human resource manager in a large multinational. We welcome a new guest to the show, and his name is Justin, who has become a good friend of mine over the last couple of years. And thanks to his generosity, we have another great few episodes coming up, all jam-packed with very interesting info. And so for work, Justin is a human resource manager in a large multinational company who also has extensive experience in the non-profit sector. He has over 12 years of experience, with around 5 of those specifically in the HR industry. In this episode, we dive into lots of interesting topics, such as the realization that there is actually so much more to HR than he had originally thought, what it's like working in the HR industry, the tough nature of the job market, and some great advice on how to increase your chances of landing that elusive interview, how we went from a degree in hospitality, then to literature, and then to economics, working in the non-profit sector, and what triggered his desire to help victims of human trafficking, and more. You can see he's had a very wide range of experiences. Just before we jump into the episode, a couple of quick points to mention. You'll notice that in some of the episodes you'll hear a beep like this. I've used this to censor out the company names that were mentioned during the interview, so we don't get into trouble from a legal standpoint. Especially since not everything we say is necessarily positive. Having said that, I did not censor out the names of the non-profit organizations which were mentioned, because as far as I'm concerned, the more exposure they get, the better, as they can never have too much support. Alrighty, I hope this helps with your podcast fix. Here we go, on to episode 6. Please enjoy. Okay, I am here with Justin, who has kindly offered some of his time for us for this interview. Thank you, Justin.
No, thank you for inviting me, Daniel.
And oh my God, we had some technical issues, as you do, before starting. I think we've been troubleshooting our recording setup here. It's far from technically advanced, but I think we spent about an hour just trying to get stuff working now. I've been very fortunate that Justin also has a bit of a background in the AV world, so we eventually got to the bottom of it. The crux of the matter was my silliness and stupidity, but we got there in the end. Thank you, Justin.
No problem.
It's definitely good to have you around to help me with that. Right, so we are here in sunny Seoul, South Korea, talking here, sipping on some good old H2O. And I've known Justin for almost a year now. Yeah. So funnily enough, it seems like we've known each other for a lot longer. I guess we met through a mutual friend.
That's right.
Yeah.
A classmate of mine, I think.
Yeah, a classmate of Justin's from back in the States. And yeah, we just hit it off. That's great. And hanging out a lot in Korea, which is cool. We are here to obviously talk about work, rest and play. And we'll start off with talking about the work side of things. And Justin, you are in the HR space.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, so I'll sort of hand it over to you to sort of explain what you do in terms of job title and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
I'd like you to sort of start off as to what's brought you to Korea. So I'm sure you did something in the States and then you moved over to Korea for whatever reason. So over to you, mate. And yeah.
Sure. So Daniel, thank you. Thanks for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share. And yes, it's been about a year. Feels like I've known you a lot longer. Could be various reasons for that. But all good and fun. So let's see, what brought me to Korea? So actually, before coming to Korea, I was out in the States. I lived out in Michigan, actually, the Midwest. I was human resource manager for a multinational company. They had a 2-year human resource leadership program. I went through there. I rolled off program, and I was a HR manager for one of the businesses out in Michigan, Grand Rapids. During that time, actually, I met a woman who was just amazing, who I ended up marrying, or who I feel so fortunate she married me. And we decided to come to Korea. She's Korean, and she was a doctor, and so she could actually only practice in Korea. And so we moved out here. We made a big decision to move out here. I've uprooted myself, and I've been fortunate enough, because that multinational company that I work for has offices across the globe and in Korea. I was able to get picked up by the Korea office. They have me doing recruitment, which is an HR function, a little bit different from an HR manager, but still within the HR realm. And so far, it's been almost 2 years since I've been there. Very different culture in Korea. Same company, but slightly different culture, modified to adapt to, I guess, how Koreans work. But it's been a great experience.
Right. So in Korea, you've done recruitment specifically for almost a year. That's which was sort of, I guess, a little bit different to what you were doing back in the States.
That's right.
So if you could just go into a little bit more detail. So you were a HR manager. Now, to me, HR manager sounds like it's a very generic term that which I'd like to sort of get into a little bit more. So HR manager, what does that actually mean? Does that mean you're managing the HR team, or does that mean you're managing the human resources in the company, or what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, when I was in grad school, I didn't know much about HR other than I didn't want to be in it.
Okay.
And that's also because I didn't really know what was entailed. So I understand your question totally. So human resource management, I mean, when you break it down, depending on how you look at it, some people think it sounds so shallow to call people resources. But the reality is any company, along with all the different resources that you have running the company, people are probably the most important resource for a company. And so human resource manager, their role is to help manage people. So you have the line manager who's thinking about the business and the direction, but they're not always thinking about the people. You have great managers, great leaders sometimes that do, and those you wish there were more of them. The reality is, because we don't always have great managers, the human resource manager's job is to ensure the employees are in a good work environment, that they're happy at what they're doing, and that they can be supported, that they have a voice, especially when, like, say, they have a difficult manager who doesn't listen to them, who is putting them in very difficult situations. So we're there to support them. Underlying all of that, of course, we're doing this because it's for the best interest of the business. Mm-hmm. Happy people, they enjoy their work, they're going to have great outcomes, and it's going to benefit the business, and it's going to benefit everybody.
And when you mention the business, are you referring to the part of the company that's bringing in the money, so to speak? What do you mean by the business? So
when I say the business, I guess I'm looking at the company holistically, and I'm also looking at the bottom line, right? Because at the end of the day, the company has to make money. If it's not making money, there's no reason for it to exist. People lose their jobs, etc. So when I say the business, it's the businesses, that companies' goals and objectives, or their strategies that they're trying to achieve. We look at it from the people perspective. How is this strategy going to be achieved through the support of the people? Or is that goal or objective realistic, considering we know how everybody's already doing? So we play an intermediary role between people and the business, because again, we we're not slave driver, or nobody wants to work for a company that's just gonna, be like slave drivers, or, just force objective after objective onto them without really putting the people's welfare into consideration.
Right. Okay. So that's cool. So I guess if I was to rephrase it in a different way, as a HR manager, so we're focusing on what you were doing in the States before you moved to Korea at this point of the conversation. You were effectively there to look after the interests of the human resources of the company, whether they be the managers or the people being managed in the various teams out there.
That's an accurate kind of.
Okay. So for you specifically, Justin, as a human resource manager, were you aligned to specific areas within the company, or was it more just you're more like the point of contact for the whole company?
So I held various roles actually when I was in that company.
Okay.
My last role was within our business. On average, most HR managers in the company I work for will have about 300 employees they're supporting. So I had about 300 employees I was supporting, primarily in the engineering functions, as well as finance, IT, a little bit of commercial, meaning salespeople. But the bulk of my people were engineers.
So when you say your people, so you are, if the manager that you're speaking with manages 300 plus people, is that the way?
So within the 300 people I'm supporting, or here, let's break down kind of the organization of it, right? There's different functions within the organization. So you have engineering, you have commercial, you have marketing, you have IT, finance, etc. Within engineering, there will be kind of that organizational structure. And I guess I don't want to call it a hierarchy per se, but you have management. You have like the executive engineer person for that specific product line.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Then you have different project managers or lead project managers. And it kind of trickles down to these different leadership roles. So my role as HR manager, I didn't work too much with the executive, but all of his direct reports, those managers and the different functions within that product line for engineering, I would work with them and I would support all of the employees below.
Right. So it's effectively the middle management.
Yeah.
So when you say executives, you're talking like C-level executives?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so your COOs, your CFOs, et cetera, et cetera.
So the way the company I work for, we recently made a huge switch. We how would you say, I guess, separated, we stratified, I guess, the population a little bit and the functions of HR managers. So we have HR business partners. Their function is to work on the executives, the C-levels, and they work more around the strategy and different type of initiatives that are going to be coming out. And then the HR manager, they're working more kind of below. Not one person is better than the other. It's just different functions.
Yep.
And the reason for that was we found that a lot of employees didn't know who their HR manager was. There wasn't a lot of direct communication or interaction. We changed the model so that we can actually focus on people more. And by dividing up the roles, meaning as an HR manager, this is my job to support the people. As an HR VP, your job is to focus on the executive level. There's a clearer distinction of roles and responsibilities. Whereas before in the company, before this, everybody was doing a lot of everything. And so it was easy to forget about the people.
Right. So you mentioned the HR people who work with the business partners. By business partners, are you referring to the executives?
Yes.
Okay. And when the roles were, I guess, more, I'll call it segregated, the HR managers, were you guys managing just one person manages the group of engineers, the other group manages finance? Is that the way it worked, or?
So it varies. There's always gray to everything, right?
Sure.
And so, like I said before, my job was to support the engineers, but also, because there was only about 220 engineers, I still have capacity to support more.
Sure.
So I was also supporting our marketing. I was also supporting other functions which had less people, but together, when you added all those people that I was supporting, well, now I have about 300 people I'm supporting. So that means basically I'm working within different functions with different managers from different areas to ensure that the employees are all being supported.
Wow, it sounds really interesting. So in the States, you were there for a few years, about 4 years-ish, I guess, before you moved to Korea. Is that right?
So I was there for about 3 years.
3 years, yep.
And then I moved to Korea and I've been here for about a year.
Does that include that 2-year leadership program?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that leadership program was basically, it was like HR training on steroids.
Right. Yeah. So you call it a business leadership program. What is that? Is that sort of on the job training program, or is it like 2 years of theoretical lectures and stuff? What was involved?
So it's called the HR leadership program, and it's basically the company's executive pipeline.
Meaning,
they hire high potentials or people they feel they've identified as high potentials.
It's like a fast track sort of.
Yeah.
So people who go through this HR leadership program are more likely or are well set up to sort of advance
quickly and to higher positions.
Gotcha.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
So the way it works is basically they bring you on board and they throw you into a fire and they say survive. They'll provide extra support and resources and everything so you don't drown or so that you don't burn too badly. But and then after about 9 months they yank you and they put you into another fire.
So these are real problems within the company?
Yeah. So like my second rotation in the company, they put me on a site that the business acquired about 3 years prior. It was with our division out in Washington State. It was a business that was the integration just didn't go well.
Right.
So everybody was like not happy. All of the top engineers. The reason why we bought that business was because they had really great engineers that we wanted to maintain. We were losing them. They were all leaving one at a time. And so my manager told me, "Hey, so your assignment is to go in there, find out why people are leaving, and stop it."
Wow.
Yeah. And this is my first day my first role as a generalist. So
your first day on your second rotation.
First day on my second rotation. Actually, my first day on that job, I had to lay off somebody. So
first day on your first rotation?
No, first day on that second rotation, I had to lay off somebody who was just coming back from maternity leave.
Oh no!
Because they wanted to lay her off prior. They were worried about her health because she was having complications with labor or with the child. With their baby, and so they decided we'll wait until she comes back. Well, I was there the first day she came back, so it was my job to lay her off, even though I had no background on this person. So that's kind of the examples of the type of work like they were requested to do.
And there's so much here, and the reason HR is so interesting to say an outsider like myself is there are so many sort of very difficult situations you guys have to deal with, and this being one of them. Now, the whole, and this is a common thing that comes up in a lot of discussions, is this whole, okay, if someone comes back from maternity leave and if they're laid off, that's quite a bad look on the company, isn't it? Like,
yeah, of course.
Don't a lot of people take that to court, so to speak, for unfair dismissal?
So this woman did.
Right.
We went through litigation, and at the end of the day, we settled. But technically, what's really interesting, and this is the thing, right? So, we haven't talked about it, but maybe we will later. My background's in nonprofit, right? So I've always worked with kind of the struggling class of people, like homeless people, homeless families, and individuals. And so my heart is always with people. And so to come on my first day on the job in Washington State, I'm at a brand new site. I don't have relationships with anybody yet. The site has about 240 or 60 people that my job is to get to know them and build these relationships, right? But my first day is I have to lay one of their people off who just came back from maternity leave.
That's tough.
It's not just tough on me. I mean, it's tough for her too. And it's tough for the entire site, right? Who, they feel like this company just broke us. They bought us and now they broke us.
So how did the company justify? Because my limited understanding of labor law anywhere is that a company needs to justify why they lay off a specific person in a specific situation.
That role was eliminated. That person's role just did not exist globally anymore. They got rid of it on a global level. But again, the task was actually to eliminate her role before.
Right.
And this is the difference between HR managers and kind of business and where we stand, right? So the business wanted to eliminate the role, which means eliminate, basically lay her off.
Right.
The HR manager at that time said, that's not a good idea because, she's having complications with her pregnancy. This type of stress is going to make it more complicated. Let's not do that because we want her to be okay.
Right.
So actually this is the irony. You can't talk about this. You have a person who's trying to do what's in the best interest, do the right thing for this person, but we can't really tell her that.
Right. From the employee's perspective, it's just like, oh, you bastard, you're laying me off when I get back.
Exactly.
When in fact you were trying to look after her interests by not doing it before.
Exactly.
Right.
But
geez.
again, it's,
between a rock and a hard place.
It's very difficult.
Whoa, okay. Geez, there's so much stuff here. Right. So that nonprofit stuff we're definitely going to come back to. I'm really interested in that. The rotations you mentioned as part of your leadership program, how many rotations did you have?
So it's over a 2-year period, it's 3 rotations.
3 rotations.
On average, it's about 9 months for each rotation.
What were the 3 areas that you rotated
So
to?
my first one was in talent acquisition, so recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
My second one was as a on-site human. It was an HR VP role, but it was like business partner. But it's only because I was the only HR manager in that area.
Uh-huh.
And then my third rotation was as an HR manager, supporting our business.
Okay, so that on-site HR manager, which you mentioned, was essentially BP, business partner role. That was effectively a good opportunity for you, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Since there's no one else, you are it. Hence, you were expected to step up. Hence, on your first day, you're.
So good opportunity, great training, very painful learning curve.
I should say opportunity in speech marks.
Air quotes.
Yes.
That's
air
right.
Quotes, exactly.
But by far, that was the best experience. I mean, to go from that situation to turn it around and then to build trusting relationships with not just the managers, but the employees. And then even to find it difficult to leave after because those relationships are built. I think that's what, this program is all about. It's a catalyst to help you grow faster within this realm.
Wow.
So it was intense. It was a hard 2 years, but this literally most of the top HR executives that come out of our company have all gone through that process or has gone through this training.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to come to this a little bit later, but let's since we're talking about it now. So with this leadership program, obviously there would have been a selection process.
Yeah.
So you needed to apply. I guess it's analogous to trying to apply for a scholarship somewhere. You need to apply, show your credentials, show why you would be a ideal candidate.
Yeah.
So what was involved in that process?
So I think with any job search, especially nowadays, it takes a lot more than just sending in your resume.
Right, of course.
You have to be very proactive and get yourself out there.
Yes.
Use your network. In my case, it was during my MBA years. So towards the second year, I started going to all the different MBA conferences, job conferences. In particular, in the States, they have minority MBA conferences.
What do you mean by minority?
So they'll have like an MBA conference for African Americans. They'll have one for Hispanics.
Oh, really?
They'll have one for Asians. The Asians one isn't really highly participated, but African American, Latin American, like they do this so that there's a place where these diverse candidates can go to, and where companies can actually kind of focus. There's a women's conference,
right?
So I went to I think there was it the Latin American or African American one, and everybody goes there. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. Like you have white folks there, you have black folks at the Latinos.
I'm confused. Then why would they call it a African American?
That's a target audience.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, America being such a politically correct country, there's no issues with calling it that type of
No, I mean, because we're trying, I think in America, we're striving to be more diverse.
diverse, right?
We're
right.
not, I mean, we're not there yet. I mean, watch the news.
Mm.
We're
Yes.
not there yet.
Yes.
And it seems like we're backtracking a little bit. But these conferences provide that environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Where companies can come and say, okay, boom, it's a more easy targeted area to find candidates. And literally companies from all over the US, Fortune 500s come in, they'll interview people there on the spot.
Oh, wow.
They'll look at resumes, they'll set up appointments for interviews that day or the next day. So for me, it was that actually. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. So that makes more sense. Cause on face value, I was like, what? That's weird. But, a lot of companies and the large corporations, especially, are emphasizing diversity, and you may have a specific subset of a particular demographic, but you obviously want to go more diverse, and you know what type of demographic you're looking for, and things like that would be a good way to target that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny because I went there and I spoke to a couple of other big companies, and they looked at my CV or resume. They're like, "Oh, it's nice. We're not going to interview you, though." I was like, "What? Like what? Like that? Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know."
Right.
And then it was at the point where I pretty much gave up. I was like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. What a waste of time."
Giving up for applying for one of these fast track programs? Is that what you're talking about? Or
well,
applying for
jobs? Jobs generally,
okay.
right? And then it was at the point where I pretty much gave up. I was like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. What a waste of time."
Giving up for applying for one of these fast track programs? Is that what you're talking about? Or applying for jobs?
Jobs generally, right? And the company that I'm working for now, I knew the name of it. I just didn't really think of.
Right.
I never was interested in a big multinational company. I'm like, that's silly.
Okay.
But I wanted to be a consultant. I hope you interview somebody who's a consultant later.
Consultant in the HR industry? Or
no, just general
like a management consultant.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what I thought I wanted to do. Yeah. But what the hell do consultants do?
I was like that for a while, actually. Yeah. But anyway, keep going.
I know now, but still, it's like, what the hell do they do? So I stumbled upon this company. I just ended up engaging in a conversation, like just a very cordial conversation.
At one of the conferences? At
this conference.
So this is like literally like one of those booths. You just walk up and say,
actually, it wasn't a booth. I mean, this is a nice booth.
Oh,
it was like, wow. But the guy that was there talking about this program, I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And I just started talking to him and shared a little bit of my background.
Right.
And then the guy's like, hey, do you have a CV? I'm like, yeah, here. The next thing you know, he set me up for an interview.
Like a few days later?
No, literally the next day.
Oh, wow. Just coming to our office and...
It was, later that afternoon, and then the next day I had another interview.
So these places, people come in their suits with their resumes, ready to do an interview on the spot.
You'll hear occasionally, like down the hall, I got a job!
Wow.
Like just like that. Like the companies have the power to hire people right there.
So in the booths, you have your recruiting managers...
Yeah,
there.
And you have your recruiters and you have the managers sometimes there too.
It's like a mobile office, effectively.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, think about it. If I'm a company and I want to hire great talent, I want to hire great diverse talent, and this great person is also interviewing at 3 or 4 or 5 other companies, and they're going to identify this guy as great talent. Like, are you going to wait and say, hey, so in 2 weeks, why don't we invite you to, or are you going to hire them right there and nab them?
So it's like a win-win for the potential employees. Because I was confused at first, because normally the standard application process will take multiple rounds of interviews, and then you may or may not need to do some sort of psychometric analysis or test or aptitude, theoretical, whatever exam. But this is just like, bang, right. At those conferences, is it normally just 1 or 2 rounds? Or like they'll have an initial round that, right, I like
every company is very so even me, I had 2 interviews, but then after that I had a final interview on their site, like I think a month later.
You had 2 interviews at the conference.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So
I like that.
So I mean, again, that's and a little bit of a tangent, but I mean, I think for any of the young people listening today, if they're wondering like, oh, I've applied to 100 jobs or 300 jobs and I haven't heard back. That's the reality of today's market, right?
Definitely.
When I was unemployed, kind of at the crux of like the financial crisis, I must apply to 500 or 600 things and only got like maybe 3 or 4 rejection letters.
That's consistent with my experience as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So what I learned from that though was you need to be creative on how you create face time. Face value, like you can't put a price on face value. So going to the conferences, talking to people face to face, using your network or your friends' networks, and going out for coffee, priceless. You know, you think like, why would I want to go to this stupid whatever event, and all they do is just network and drink and act stupid, and especially for those introverted people, because that's how I always felt. It's priceless. The opportunity to get in front of people and then, you know, share yourself as well as learn about other people. If you find a connection, boom, suddenly you have a guy who's gonna, or a woman who's gonna potentially think about you if they hear about an opening that might fit you. So you can't buy that on Facebook ads, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's so tough because I remember when I was searching for jobs. I'm very similar with you, Justin. Like when you go to those events, it just seems so. A lot of it seems so artificial. You can see everyone's very keen. Everyone's there for the same reason, and everyone's putting on their best face and being overly keen. And you just think, I don't want to be here. This sucks. But you're right. Like, and it makes sense. Like, if someone's looking at hundreds of resumes and they don't know who these people are versus if they've met you a week ago at a conference, probably won't even be a day ago.
One example. So when I was unemployed, I was back in 2008, I think. 9 months. I went through 9 months of unemployment.
That would have been tough.
This is the time I applied to so many jobs. I didn't hear anything. I had my previous boss help me get an interview at like a hotel. We ended up talking and we were like, this is not a good fit. Like, I agree. Thanks for your time though. It's like, I can't even fake it. Like, this just isn't something that I have I just don't want to do this. But it wasn't until like month 8, I started realizing like, there's so many, like, why am I limiting myself to only this method, like applying online for jobs? And literally, like probably a month later, I was pending 3 jobs, or I was in the process of 3 jobs and in communication with people. Wow. Because one, there was a nonprofit I really wanted to work for. They did work in human trafficking. I was like, oh wow, dream job. And I found that the director was lecturing at different places, venues, and talking about things. So I just popped in. I went and I listened, and then afterwards I introduced myself, and then she said, hey, you should apply to these positions. We have a couple of positions open, and, why don't you send me your resume? I'm like, actually, I've already sent my resume to your organization 3 times, but sure, yeah, here,
Did you mention that you'd sent? Okay.
No, I didn't. I didn't mention it. I just thought it in my head.
Of course, yes.
But then actually I got an offer from them. It was a volunteer position, which sounds crazy at a nonprofit place, right? A volunteer position that would have turned into a full-time job. But that's how they vet people. They want to see if they're serious and everything. Yep. So like, boom, literally a month later, I went through 3 rounds with the FBI because they were agents there too. And I was talking to them and they're like, hey.
At the conference?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So little by little, all these different ways of, approaching work or looking for a job, like just suddenly the world became so much bigger versus like how I was thinking, but 8 months prior.
So wow. So I'll call it a response rate went up exponentially after initiating FaceTime.
Yes. Like black and white.
Whoa.
And it's also because I was genuinely interested in the areas that I was looking into, and I think the people I spoke to could feel how genuine I was, right?
Wow, that's amazing. That's some great advice.
But that's a tangent. So
no, we're all about tangents here. That's great. That's really, really good. Okay, so just coming back to applying for
getting the HRLP program, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't applying as much as it was having that FaceTime, getting that first interview, getting recommended for the second interview. After that, the third interview was on site. At that point, I think they already know they want to hire you. It's just what part of the business are you going to go to?
Do you know how many people were recruited into that program that year?
My year, I think there was maybe 25 people.
Because I'd imagine it'd be a very competitive thing to get to.
So maybe 25 people actually got hired. But then I think there must have been thousands of applicants, more than thousands.
So I'm assuming the vast majority would have applied through the website, online, blah, 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 blah. And then did you get to speak with the other 20 odd people and see how, did did many of them follow come in through a similar way through you, through the conference, or were you one of the few, or?
So a couple of people came through the same way. Some people came through, they found internships first with the company.
Right, yes.
And then from the internship, it kind of goes into
of course,
this
a great
program.
way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah. Most multinational companies pay for interns, right? Whereas small companies work for free.
Right.
But yeah, so a lot of people went through internships. The other ones, like most big companies have target universities, or kind of they look at specific schools that they want to recruit from, and they'll go there on an annual basis, and they'll have interviews. What is it? What's that school in Utah? BYU. I think we have a couple of people, alumni, like executive level alumni, that would go to BYU. They would have literally a camping weekend with a bunch of possible potentials. They'll go white river rafting, they'll do this, they'll do that. And then from there, though, these managers are actually getting to know all the people. And they're deciding I like this guy. Why don't we interview this guy? Why don't we bring this guy on board?
That's a great way to recruit people. Really tough for the candidates, I reckon.
But it's not cheap either for the company. I mean, think about it.
So it's all paid for by the company.
Yeah.
Wow. Potentially a lot of fun, I guess, for the candidates. It depends on what your attitude, I guess, is to that type of thing. But sorry, pardon me. I'm from Australia. So what does BYU stand for?
I don't know, but it's like the big Mormon school
in Utah. Yeah, so one of the big colleges, universities.
It's one of the really big.
Right. Okay.
Brigham Young.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just I literally have very little idea when it comes to American stuff.
Me too.
But okay, so this leadership program, did you come into it straight after uni, or?
So they changed recently, but when I got in, they were only taking masters in human resource masters in human resources, and MBA students.
Masters in human resources or MBA students.
That's right.
Okay, irrespective of number of years experience or whatever, that was the preference.
No, so the preference is to have years of experience.
Right.
And then what it comes down to at the end of the day is the people that are hiring these people, right? So every program manager is slightly different. Some are more traditional in their values and what they look for, kind of for these leadership picks. I think traditionally the company I work for, that's not always the case, but most of the time there's a piece that's really interesting, which my program manager felt strong about, was kind of this servant leadership piece.
Right, yes.
So he liked the fact that I had a lot of nonprofit experience. Whereas, I applied for the Johnson and Johnsons. And they're like, why are you applying for our company? I'm not kidding when I say that.
Why? As in,
it's like you have no corporate experience. Why would you want to work for us? Kind of thing.
Right. You mentioned servant leadership. For our listeners' ID, can you just explain what you mean by that?
So I think there's a general misconception of, or not misconception. There's a general thinking around the term leadership. Most people see leadership as somebody who is at the front, kind of in the spotlight, kind of rallying the troops and getting everyone to move left and right. Servant leadership, it's a different mind frame. It's leadership that serves the people. So when I say BYU is like a big target school, we have a lot of people. I'm not trying to create any religious anything, but Mormons have a tendency, I think I don't know Mormonism too much, but I know a lot of the young people, they go off and they do mission work.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And they support youth and they do this. So that type of behavior, say in a corporate environment, as an HR manager, where you have people that already care, like managers that already care, well, that's a no-brainer. And this guy's getting an MBA, so he's thinking about business. Oh, he's a perfect candidate for HR manager role in our company. So servant leadership is really acting in the best interest of the people.
Right. So
still keeping business in mind, because at the end of the day, you're a business. But really paying mind and supporting and helping develop the people that you support.
So I guess as the name suggests, you're a leader who's willing to serve.
Exactly.
Rather than just bossing people around and telling them what to do.
Or backstabbing them, or trying to use them just to get what they need, which... Unfortunately, I see that a lot too.
Yes, it's very, very common in the corporate world, so to speak.
Yeah.
Something we also discussed with one of our previous guests, Dennis, in one of our first few episodes. So That's episodes 1 to 6, so you can check that out if you get a chance. A small plug in there. Right. So for yourself, Justin, because you've got quite a star-studded resume when it comes to degrees. So I'd like.
I went to too much school. It's not star-studded.
So brief us, because I'm interested in how you made that transition into this leadership program. So tell us about. So you've got a Bachelor of, what was it?
Hospitality.
Bachelor of Hospitality, and you got that from which university?
New York University.
Also known as NYU.
Yes.
Pretending to know my American colleges.
When it's an acronym, yes.
So you got your Bachelor of Hospitality, and that, how long did that take? Was that 4 years? 4 years?
Yeah.
And then did you go, and then straight after that, what happened?
I went to another school for another 4 years, and I got a bachelor's in liberal arts.
Bachelor of Liberal Arts?
Yeah, with a focus in econ and literature, or economics.
Economics and literature. And where was that at?
That was at a small liberal arts school called Hopkins University. It was actually, I was part of the first class of the school in 2001. It just opened.
Oh, Soka is an SOKA, Soka.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was actually a really incredible experience. That going into it, I was really bitter and kind of confused as to why the hell am I doing this. There's a lot of family conversations around that, but it's actually that's where I got my education. New York was great.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun. My alcohol tolerance skyrocketed. There's no better place to live in than New York City in the U.S. I think it's.
Jeez, I've never been to New York. I really want to go there one day.
My wife says it's nothing compared to Seoul because Seoul's so big.
Right.
But there's something about the culture in New York. Right. It's just so raw and real.
Isn't New York a lot bigger than Seoul?
No, not at all. I don't think so.
Okay.
New York City.
Okay, New York City.
Yeah,
and Seoul, we're just talking about, I guess Seoul is like you have to call it metropolitan Seoul. It's like, there's no one specific city.
Because it's Seoul. It's New York City. Seoul, that's why it's so big.
Well, yeah, Seoul is, yeah.
So, but anyway, so yeah, that was, so that's that. And then after that, I've always worked, but then I did full-time work and I got into nonprofit work actually.
After you did your Bachelor of Liberal Arts?
Yeah.
When you say, okay, so a few questions. So when you say you've always worked, you mean you've always worked part-time while studying?
That's right. I've always worked part-time. I've always had jobs, or internships.
Okay. So you went from a Bachelor of Hospitality, and what drove you to then go to further your studies in economics and literature? Why not go into the hospitality industry?
So, I mean, we could have like a 10-day talk about this over beers, and it still wouldn't end.
We'll have to do a part two. But, the short and abridged version.
So the short abridged version actually is because my parents felt really strong about this mission of this other school.
Oh.
The mission of Soka University is fostering a steady stream of global citizens living a contributive life to society, something like that.
Say that again. Leading a contributive life.
Fostering a steady stream of global citizens living or leading a contributive life.
Oh, wow.
So the heart of it is very ideal.
Right.
And so my parents realized there's a big emptiness in my life that clearly New York didn't fill. So there's a lot of pressure to go to that school. And so just to, again, the abridged version, I applied. I surprisingly got in. And so I made a deal with my father that said I would go if I got in. But like I said, it was the best 4 years. It was only 4 years of school, but it felt like 10 years of life.
Because
the curriculum was so challenging, because personally I was challenged internally so much, because I grew. Like I found myself at that time.
So from a personal, not just academic, but personal. So
academically, I grew because I was really stupid apparently before, and it became clear when I got my first paper back, and I'm getting C's and D's, and the international student next to me is getting like B's and A's. I'm like, you don't even speak English. How is this happening?
College in the States isn't cheap. So how did that work? Were your parents willing to support you?
So
or?
actually, my parents supported for the first year at that second school. So
Right.
NYU, going backtrack, NYU is not cheap. It's actually really expensive.
Right.
But I was fortunate. My parents helped the first year, and then after that, I was able to get scholarships.
Oh, wow.
I was an RA.
What's an RA?
A resident assistant. So that as a resident assistant, you're supporting the other students in the dormitories. But you save jackload of money.
How come?
Because you don't have to pay housing.
Oh, so that's the benefit.
Food, yes, housing and food. And in New York, housing and food is the most expensive thing.
Do you get a wage on top of that? That's the wage.
That's the wage.
Wow, that's
huge, right?
Yeah.
And then again, like I said, I got some scholarships from my program and everything, and I applied to a lot of scholarships.
Whoa.
So I was able to zero out most of it, but my parents did help a lot, and I probably will owe them for the rest of my life.
Still, it's very good of you to get those scholarships.
Yeah. And then for Soka University, kind of similar thing. My parents paid the first year, and then after the first year, I realized actually this is really good for me. So I told them it's okay, I'll take out loans and I'll take care of that. At the end of the day, my parents ended up paying the loan, so now I owe them money. Okay. I have a piece of paper that tells me how much I owe them. And then, like I said, after that, I went into the nonprofit sector. Initially, I wanted to go into human trafficking or the anti-human trafficking movement, but it's really interesting. Even though it's a nonprofit sector, the people that work in those type of organizations, they're not very big and there's not many people, but these people are like top notch. They worked at the UN for 4 years. They have 2 master's degrees. They have like who the hell is this person? They went to top schools and they care. They have like these civil duty kind of liberty things where they really want to help people. So somebody coming out of undergrad, even with 2 undergrads, I can't get a job there. I can only get a volunteering position at the front desk.
That's still pretty impressive in itself. Even just getting your foot into those places.
Yeah, and getting your foot in the door, right? But yeah, so I ended up finding a job as a case manager, working with the homeless population. I started first as a front desk person for a nonprofit that supported homeless families and individuals. And then a few months later, they realized like, hey, you should be a case manager. You shouldn't be a front desk person. Wow. So that was kind of my entry into the nonprofit world.
You mentioned you had an interest in human trafficking. What drew you to that? So did you end up working in the human trafficking space, or was it more the homeless?
No. So I became a certified volunteer for that organization. It's called Coalition Against Slavery and Human Trafficking. Wow. So I had to do like this 40-hour training bit where I went to, in the evenings I went and I had to study and do all this other stuff. And I volunteered as on the phone hotline like once a week.
In this human trafficking space? Yeah. That would have been pretty intense.
Yeah. So your question before that was like, well, why was I interested in it? So while I was at Soka University, part of the requirement is to study abroad. We all study languages and you have to study abroad in that language. I studied Japanese. So I went to Japan in my 3rd year. And it's kind of interesting. Japan's kind of like Korea, except cleaner.
Yes.
Sorry for any Koreans that are listening, but it's true. And what I noticed is there's so much prevalent prostitution all around the subway areas in Japan. But what's even more interesting is most of those women aren't Japanese. So, a lot of foreigners, Chinese, Southeast Asian, even like European, white, maybe from Russia or, somewhere in Europe. But it just was so mind-boggling. I didn't understand because Japan, I'm American, so I don't know Japanese culture, even though I think I do. And I'm just so shocked that for a country like Japan to have so much prevalent prostitution that nobody looked like, they just turn a blind eye to, like, I don't get it. Right. So it was about 3 months into my study abroad. I said, I want to talk to one of these girls. And so one evening, they always ask, can I approach you if you want a massage? Massage ikaka desu ka? Do you want a massage? Do you want a massage? And usually I kind of shy away and run. I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. And I walk away. But this one time, this girl, she seemed about my age. She seemed kind of, like somebody I would have drinks with, like kind of a friend. I'm like, hey, can I just pay you the money? And instead, can I just talk? Hey, sure, yeah. Why not? If you're going to pay money, sure. So she took me back to the parlor, and then we sat and we talked for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
In Japanese?
Yeah. Broken Japanese. She had broken Japanese. My Japanese was broken, so it worked out great.
So what nationality was she?
She was Chinese.
Okay.
So what I learned was she was Chinese. She's been in Japan for like, I think 4 or 5 years. She got there because she was tricked. They said it was a good job, but then it ended up being kind of massage or prostitution. She's been there. Like, everybody there is kind of like her family now. She's actually been home to China multiple times since. She sends money home. I asked her, well, why don't you tell the police? Like, I can't tell the police, or why don't you just leave? Well, because she sends money home to her family. So her family thinks she's doing really well. They get money from her. They don't know what she's doing.
So she earns pretty good money.
Good is very subjective, right? Because it's good she's from a small town in China, outside in the suburb, rural area, right? So it's good in that sense, but it's not good for Japanese standards. But there's so much bias so everybody's thinking like, oh, this girl, even if she's a prostitute, she's living better in Japan than she could in China. Actually, I told my brother and his girlfriend at that time, like, hey, yeah, so I talked to this person. They live better here than they would anywhere else, and kind of like this very judgmental view. But my 30-minute, 40-minute conversation with her, I realized like this girl's trapped. Where can she go? She can't go home and tell anybody what she's doing. She'll be ostracized. She can't tell the police. She'll get arrested. She can't run away to where? Meanwhile, she's like, Japanese men are horrible. They're so dirty and perverted, and just. She kept telling me how nice I was just because I wanted to talk to her, which kind of blew my mind. So literally, for about a week afterwards, I couldn't think straight because what I thought was right and wrong suddenly was all like all these shades of gray. And then after that, I said, oh, I went from literature, what I was studying in school, then I switched over to econ because I figured you can have a greater impact with economics than you can with literature.
Right.
And then, my final thesis paper in my university was all on human trafficking.
Wow!
So I just did an in-depth research, and so that's where I really wanted to go. But when I couldn't find work, what I realized was, homeless population case management, human trafficking case management. There's a lot of similarities. So if I can do this, at least I'll build my experience.
Whoa! Just out of curiosity, just backtracking for a sec, the job that Chinese lady thought she was applying for, what type of job was that?
Calligraphy. She thought it was calligraphy.
So it's that vastly different that they get tricked, I guess.
And once you're there, you're there.
Oh my God.
What are you gonna do? So that's why it's so interesting. I don't think that's all the cases in prostitution.
Of course.
It's very voluntary. Women are doing it, and doesn't mean their economic situations are any better. But there's clearly this, at an initial point, it was against her will. But then you acclimate to it. You have to survive. So maybe it's not against her will anymore. It's her life. That's all she can, what else can she do? So that's why I was like, this is really messed up. Yeah.
So, okay, wow. That's, now, I think we're definitely going to have to do a part 2. This stuff is so, what's the word? So interesting. I'm just coming back to, I guess, the career side of things and the work aspect. I'm curious. So you've got a 4-year degree in hospitality under your belt.
Yeah.
Was it something? Did you hate hospitality, so it was easy to go, or it was the pressure from your parents? Reason enough, or what caused that jump? That's what I'm really curious about.
Hopefully the young people listening to this are a lot wiser than I am, but I thought hospitality encompassed everything, restaurants, tourism, everything, right? What I didn't do deep research into was what classes or what concentration does the school offer within hospitality. So I used to want to be a chef and open a restaurant.
Oh.
So I thought, New York has a hospitality program. Great, I'm going to go.
Right.
Which is really so fortunate in some ways that I could get in without really doing all that deep research.
But that decision-making process is probably very consistent with the vast majority of high school graduates.
The thought was, it's not California, it's not home, and I'm ready to get out of here.
Oh, so you were living in California at the time.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's why I initially went to New York, because I wanted a food and beverage program. They didn't have one. They had hotel management. And after going through, we did so many tours of all the hotels in New York, and I was like, this I don't enjoy this.
So then once you found out, why not transfer to another university? Oh.
I'm in New York. Where am I? I mean, actually, my friends were all like, what are you doing? I went through like the AP track, like, the honors classes and like all the college level classes in high school, and I did pretty well. So you
were a high academically you're doing well.
Yeah, well, in high school I was doing really well. Yeah. And so all my friends in New York were like, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time doing this? And I was like, well, because I don't have to do what you're doing.
Well, what were they doing?
They were doing like, what is it? Biochem. Right. They're all pre-meds.
Right.
All pre-meds.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So you could have gone into that area if you'd wanted to.
But I didn't have much guidance.
Right.
I didn't have any, I didn't have like a senior or older brother who was kind of saying, hey, guiding me through the way.
But I would argue if you had a dream of being a chef and opening a restaurant, good on you for pursuing that. But you didn't do enough research into the tertiary institution that you're about to go into.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at other schools too. There was like Johnson's in Wales and Le Cordon Bleu in Paris and all these.
Oh, wow.
I was like, that looks so cool. Oh man, that would be awesome. But then I applied to NYU and I got in, so
why not give it a shot?
Well, after my parents talked to them for a while, because it's like I said, it's expensive, right?
Right.
So it's not like they said, sure, here's a couple $100,000.
So your parents didn't approve necessarily at first?
No, not at all. Actually, my mom, at the end of the day, my mom's like, okay, I'll send you 1 year. You have to do the rest. She's like, I'll show you how. So my parents are both very religious, right? Buddhism.
Okay.
And so my mom said, I'll show you how this faith works, and I'll send you there. You'll see. And so actually, my parents bought the house. They did like a second mortgage just to send me to school. So I was like, shit. Wow. I learned later what a second mortgage was.
Damn. Right.
But
so they were essentially letting you learn your own lesson.
I think so.
Was sort of I guess that was the type of guy. But the thing is, you were in NYU after a year or two. You'd have sort of seen, okay, this is not what I expected, but you thought, okay, I'm just going to finish it.
Well, no, I mean, you acclimate to wherever you are, right? Course, that's life. So my first year I played volleyball for the team, right? D3. Yeah.
What's D3?
Division 3. Okay. Yeah. So you have like 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Meaning we're not all that great.
Right.
But then living in New York,
it still would have been a lot of fun.
But this is the really crazy part. Yeah, I've always been so fortunate, I think, in my life. Fortunate, unfortunate. So I ended up going to this other school, Soka University, after I graduated. Right. And I left New York, I think, the end of August. And I drove cross country with the girl I was dating at the time,
right,
to California. And then school started, I think, the beginning of September. So I'm in Orange County, California now. I'm in this new place. I'm miserable because personally I don't really feel that I didn't want to be there, really. But I made a promise to my dad, so I said, okay, fine, I'll go. And then a few days later, 9/11 hits.
And that's it for episode 6. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast to make sure you automatically receive new episodes. And if and when you feel like it would be great if you could spend just a few seconds to leave a review to let me know what you think about the episode and the show. Also, if you've been enjoying the episodes and you'd love to support the show, there is a way. You can become a patron via patreon.com. That is patreon.com. And you can find us by searching for We Work, Rest and Play, all one word, from the Patreon homepage. You'll gain a bunch of exclusive access and benefits, so definitely worth checking out. Every little bit of support is a huge help and goes a very long way in keeping this show alive. And of course, thank you very much for listening. You can also refer to the website weworkrestandplay.com for the show notes, and we shall continue talking work with Justin in the next episode. And so until then, live life, take care, keep smiling. The intro and outro music is an extract from the track entitled Falling Down by the artist named Ryan Little and is used in accordance with the Creative Commons Attribution License. Thank you very much, Ryan. Further references can also be found in the show notes at www.weworkrestandplay.com.